Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BAI Marketing Podcast. My guest today is Holly Hughes, the CMO of BAI. They're an independent nonprofit agency that delivers actionable insights to the financial services industry. So, Holly, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Rusty.
Glad you're able to hop on with us. So, as the Chief Marketing Officer for BAI, I can't imagine there's probably anyone else better suited to explain exactly what BAI does than you.
Sure, absolutely. So as you said, we're a nonprofit independent organization. Really, the ultimate mission of BAI is to help leaders make really good business decisions and drive positive change in their organizations. There's so much happening in financial services, still post-financial crisis. There's a lot of foundational work in terms of reputation management, brand management, rebuilding trust. I think we continue to see that as a theme. And then banks are being disrupted pretty significantly. So they've got different types of competition. They've got a lot of power in the data that they have, but they don't necessarily use it really, well or effectively. So we come in with some really interesting research, do a lot of benchmarking research, a lot of industry research. We look at bank perceptions, consumer perceptions, and, where they meet or where there's some disconnects. We also do a lot of training. And then, as you said, too, we do a lot of thought leadership. So a lot of roundtables, forums, a lot of it's digital. We've got our own podcast too, where we talk about just the trends, the issues that people are dealing with, leaders at banks, leaders in the fintech space, all with that goal of, we don't have a specific agenda. There's no lobbying bend, as some organizations have. It's just helping people really understand what those issues are. And then ultimately they go and make that decision that's best for them and their organization.
You actually brought up lobbying because I was asked, is lobbying a big part of what y'all do, but it doesn't sound like it has anything to do with it.
No, there are definitely other financial services associations that are more focused on lobbying and, trying to get that to go the right way for a bank, as is kind of the cause. But I'm really glad that we don't. That certainly has its own place, but I think people really trust us because we're objective. There is no specific horse in the race for us. We really just want to help people understand what those issues are. That 360-degree view, connect with another leader who's maybe going through the same struggle, find some really great partners who can help them, and then make it happen, as quickly and efficiently as possible.
So then do you see a lot of collaboration during these roundtables where these financial institutions discover opportunities where there's a lot of similarities that we have with these other financial institutions, find a way to work more closely together? Clearly, there is a lot of consolidation taking place right now in the financial services markets.
Yeah, it's interesting. We kind of joke that we create a BAI safe zone when we're in these roundtables because you have, peers that have very senior jobs at major banks, but there's also some very common challenges, how they're dealing with the regulators and, staying, on top of what's best for the industry and certain things like cybersecurity, data protection. That's really, a fundamental issue in the industry overall versus something that's more of a competitive advantage. So I love when we can come in and really help tackle those types of things. There's always a little bit of group therapy, honestly, and that, people aren't alone in the struggles that they have and what they're working towards. And if we can provide some great objective data that helps them see an issue more clearly, if they can commiserate a little bit, maybe, step away from their day-to-day, see it a little bit differently. Ultimately, then they can go back and be, really effective within their organization.
It seems like data is a big core of every single conversation. How are you managing the data as far as in leveraging that, as a marketer?
I have the ability to see it through a couple different lenses. So one, the data that BAI has. So looking at what articles are resonating on our website, how are people finding us? What are they coming to us for? What are the problems they're trying to solve? And make sure that then we're on top of those issues. We're looking at those trends. We're serving the industry in the right way. And then we also try to help bankers figure out how to use all the data that they're sitting on. So I actually facilitate the roundtable with CMOs, bank CMOs. So I wear the hat myself, but then I also get to, hear them talk about their struggles. And, we're all consumers. We all have a bank. They know so much about us, maybe a frightening amount of, when big deposits come in or larger transactions. But how they're using that to understand, hey, is there an opportunity here? and sometimes it is you get that big deposit from something and then magically someone from the wealth management group calls you or is just kind of curious what's up, because they've seen that transaction hit your account. But a lot of times they miss stuff, where you're at with, if you get married, if you get divorced, if you have children, how old are those children? Are you buying a home? Are you selling a home? How can they really connect the dots, with that data? And just how overall is your cash flow? Is there something that might be helpful to you? Learning from that data, I think both for us in terms of what are people struggling with? What does seem to be resonating within our content, within our research, within our webinar series and things like that. And then also helping the banks, to figure that out on their end, I think, are both very meaningful, purposeful, challenges.
How did you get into marketing in the first place? And what were you doing before BAI?
Yeah, so I actually worked in banking. So I was, in the chair of the people that we serve, which I think is really helpful. I was senior vice president of marketing at Fifth Third Bank, which is a super regional bank that some people may or may not know based on where they're at geographically. Prior to that, I worked at a really well-respected community bank here in the Chicago market called Mid-America Bank. And it was actually my bank growing up. Prior to that, I worked more in technology. I had worked for a couple different companies, but always primarily in marketing. I had a very brief, somewhat traumatic experience in sales that caused me to say, sales is interesting and I get it, but perhaps, marketing is the best route for me. But I've really enjoyed changing industries, looking at it through a different lens. And I think the thing that I still can anchor to within financial services is that I'm not a career banker. I didn't grow up in it. So I can still see it as a consumer. I can definitely appreciate it as someone who has worked in the space and been in leadership roles in the space, but I can also still really see it as a consumer and where consumers are struggling and what their needs are. And I think as a marketer, it's so valuable that we keep a pulse on both those things.
Definitely have to have a pulse, and especially as quickly as everything is evolving and changing, whether it's the different technology platforms, software, everybody's talking about the next magic pill to be able to get this solved or be able to produce these results, track this here. It's pretty insane. One thing I was going to ask, what are the big disruptors you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's the non-banks or the fintech companies. So, financial services technology companies, leaders at the traditional banks were saying, fintech, it's a little bit of a flash in the pan. They're not going to be able to deal with the regulation and, all that stuff that we have to deal with. So they'll kind of come and go. I'm not going to worry about it. And then I think they started to see a little bit more traction and we're like, okay, maybe we should figure out how to collaborate or acquire some of these companies. And I think some banks have done pretty well with that strategy. I think it's become clear that they're not going away. There are different alternatives. Starbucks has, millions of dollars of deposits in people's phones for them to go get coffee. They essentially are holding a pretty good share of people's wallets. If your phone becomes your wallet with different, merchants, Amazon, here in Chicago, we've got some of the Amazon Go stores where you can literally just walk in and out. It understands what you've purchased with your app. So how people are using and just transacting on the payments front, huge, huge disruption. And then on the lending side, if I can crowdsource some loans, if, we've all seen, the GoFundMes and the different things set up, the technology and the alternatives continue to be much stronger. And then you have just the millennial mindsets, and they're not the perennial 18-year-old any longer. They're 30-year-olds and they're married with children, and they have a different view of building trust with organizations and how they're going to transact with organizations. So, banks still have a lot of wealth and value with their baby boomer core set. But if they're not capturing that wealth transfer, and if they're not staying relevant and really seriously looking at either, acquiring or building more innovative digital capabilities, especially on that payment side, they are going to get left behind. And I think that is why you're seeing some of that more larger consolidation. And that will continue. We see that picking up for sure. So you're starting to see some of the bigger ones. We've seen it for a while with the community banks. But
we just saw BB&T and SunTrust announce
that got a lot of attention. I think there's a lot of people at that space going, oh boy, they did it. And man, I would have loved to have been one or the other of those folks. So there's a little bit of that going on. And you don't want to be late to that party. So you want to make sure that if that is the route, that, you're partnering with someone who does have a very complementary set so that you can continue to compete on that technology front. and still have really great customer experience. I mean, we can't lose the fundamentals amongst all the technology, but it's, that's where I think we're seeing a lot of that disruption.
I love actually how the technology has really changed the way that we bank. There's really no need for me to go into a branch much anymore. I mean, I can make deposits on my phone. I can transfer money to my kids on my phone. I mean, everything is done that way. So my phone has really become my digital wallet. That creates opportunities for marketers in that space, but it also creates a lot of challenges too, because, it used to be you signed up for a bank when you got out of college at your first, and you didn't really change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we still continue to see that be a trend. I've sat in a lot of focus groups, and it's interesting why people do it. Sometimes people do it as kind of a savings strategy. They like to kind of put some money in some different places and not touch it versus their day-to-day types of accounts, or ease of use. There are certain accounts that I want to be very easy to transact, but then I want maybe a little bit more of a traditional account for my higher end of investments, wealth planning, estate planning, that type of stuff. So I think, banks have to realize it's going to be tough to get the full share of wallet from anyone, but where are they best competing? Really understanding their customers, the personas within those different spaces, and how can they grow? And then I think that could also be a strategy too, in terms of potential acquisition or, joining forces with someone that can complement their sweet spot.
Yeah, so where they're efficient, the other one's going to pick that space up and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to like to talk about leadership skills. I talk to marketers all the time, and it seems like yourself, the ones that really stand out have been able to ascend quickly within their career by really being able to get initiatives prioritized within their internal organizations. Not externally, not necessarily, but the internal prioritizations against so many other initiatives that they're competing for. So can you share why or how you've been successful at doing it and why it's so important to marketers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the very foundation is the ability to be able to create really great relationships. You have to, have a good EQ and empathy, and you have to understand your coworkers and what they're up against. And I think sometimes people discount that or think that can come after, but to me, it's just so foundational. So you've got to have good, genuine relationships. You have to understand how everyone, kind of fits within the leadership team and the organization. And then I think it's really evolved, though. In the past and early in my career, it was really about having a great relationship with the head of sales and making sure that sales marketing connection was tight. There's always conflict, so you've got, working through it productively. Lots of stories there. We all have them. But I think, within the past 5 or so years, that relationship with IT and the tech side of the house has become critical. And those are much different personalities. That's a much different
yes, they are.
Way of working. So making sure that, I'm really tight with our CTO. I understand her as a person and, what she's, going for and striving for. I really try to make sure that she understands, at a high level where we're focused and what we're about. But then it really gets into how I'm leading my team to make sure they're working effectively. And I think there's a couple key areas. One is planning. So IT plans very differently. At BAI, the IT department is using Agile. They're in these 2-week sprints, and you're in or you're out, and there's prioritization. Very, very different than how a lot of marketers work, who can tend to be creative and tend to have a great last minute idea that they want to try and, push through. But more and more, that's not happening just between us and the agency we're working with. There's a technology component. So I can't magically throw up a chat bot on the website because I had a great idea last night or I experienced something myself. So we have to get much better at planning and looking at where within our campaigns, our strategies, is there a technology play? And it's almost everything. And then how do we make sure that we loop in the IT department? So I'd say that would be a really big one. The other piece, I think, is really proving your business case. So anyone who's, in that agile environment, it's not a subjective process in terms of what makes the cut. So the different things that we look at are we score each project on revenue. So what's the potential revenue from doing this, specific activity? Is there an operational efficiency play? Could it make us be, more efficient, have a bottom line impact? Is there some risk mitigation? And sometimes our stuff falls within there. Hey, we've got just something it's really broken on the website. We got to just fix that. It's a brand risk, really. And then customer experience, which can be a little bit maybe looser, harder to define. But those first three all have dollars that we have to attach to it. And again, as marketers, we're maybe not always thinking that way. So we've got to understand, even if it's a relatively small request, how does it fit into the bigger picture, the bigger strategy, and how can we actually attach hard dollars or hard metrics within those categories, because then it scores higher, it makes the sprint, and then we can stay on our timeline. So it really has changed the way I would say we plan and we think about the different activities that we're doing.
Are there any beneficial tools that you've found or have used internally to help lead your team, but also help market internally these initiatives and prioritizations?
Yeah, I think just really trying to understand the metrics that we do have. I would say we're still probably using pretty foundational metrics in terms of understanding the impact that our current marketing has. So we use Marketo, we use Google Analytics a lot. So I would say we're probably, in the middle with a lot of other marketers in terms of what they're using, but still to be able to harness that data to say, hey, we've seen this, from this part of the website. We've seen this type of activity. If we could employ this technology or this or that, or fix this thing, then we really think that we can grow traffic, X%, or we've seen that this is a really key page of the website in order to trigger MQLs, marketing qualified leads, to go to sales. So I think it's sometimes as marketing has evolved and become more technical and metric driven, we almost have too much data. Sometimes the struggle is to figure out a couple just key pieces that everyone understands and goes, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. I understand why you want to invest in that, or we need to upgrade that, or we want to, add this technology to the tech stack that we already have.
You bring up a really good point, the amount of data. How do you decide what is the right data to use and which is not?
It's so tough, Rusty. I mean, it really is. I would say we're still kind of figuring it out. It is a big mantra for me and my team. It's metrics that matter, right now. And looking at, I think you can get so lost in the vanity metrics, the very high end, millions of impressions. And it's like, oh, wow, isn't that cool? And we went from 1.5 million to 2.5 million. Well, okay, but then what about more of the actionable, the stuff that's a little bit more actionable, the stuff that gets us closer to the sale? That can be tough because that's where you need to make sure your systems are working effectively. And we have some challenges with Marketo and our CRM to getting them to play nice and make sure sales does what they need to do to let us know where the lead's at within the cycle. And then I think the other thing, and I feel it, and I certainly hear it from the CMOs that I work with at banks, is there's no one touch. There's no singular touch these days. Everything is so multi-touch, different channels, different messages. And you go back to your old school A/B testing and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, what was the thing that really pushed them over the edge? And I don't know that anyone has really figured that out, but trying to figure out a little bit of, the test and measure, some of the A/B stuff that can help you see, well, here's where it seems to really be maybe accelerating, or this seemed to be kind of a difference maker. It's a creative science, really, at the end of the day, and I think it continues to be. The science end has picked up, but there still is your gut and, some of the creative side for sure.
Yeah, you definitely have to blend the arts, the sciences together to make it work. But Absolutely. The sciences are definitely very, very important to that.
Absolutely.
It helps make that art what it is,
right,
and in front of the right people. So what do you see is going to be the next big thing for really BAI or even the industries?
For us, it's really looking at the continued disruption, what the need is there in terms of how we can make sure that we're helping to drive positive change and stay relevant. So we've got some really strong things within research, within training, but I feel like there's brand new categories that we're not even in today where leaders need some help, and where they would appreciate our trusted brand and us as this objective resource, whether it's helping out on this data security issue or vetting vendors more holistically, or figuring out how they should innovate more effectively, how they should partner with fintechs. So I think it's what are those next big questions and challenges that they're facing, and how does BAI continue to stay relevant to them? And also, how do we stay relevant with people coming up in their career? When I look at the core audience that we have, it is the more senior leaders at banks, which is great. We've got really solid relationships. But as those people retire, if we haven't become relevant to people coming up in their career, if they've found different resources and are just Googling stuff and, trusting different influencers and things like that, then we risk becoming irrelevant.
Influencers. I mean, they're influenced by their peers and others that may not necessarily have the right experience or answers.
Right.
How are y'all managing that?
Yeah, I think we've created an interesting program, an emerging leaders program that is actually doing a number of different things. It was actually created as a strategy to drive traffic to one of our conferences as just something that we picked up from someone else that we saw that was doing it, that we applied to our industry. We scholarshiped them. We got some great PR. And you actually saw some younger people at the conference that weren't in, sport coats and khaki pants. No offense to anyone who got that as their uniform, but it just brought such great energy. Our board of directors loved it, and they were mentoring these folks and passing out their cards. And we're like, gosh, this is great. So we really blew it out then. We brought much more, we expanded the group. We're connecting with them year round. We're helping them find mentors. So they're obviously very grateful to us for this program and for this visibility. I think banks are struggling to attract and retain good young talent because it's such a tough market out there. And that, I think, would be another trend, Rusty, that we see, is this war on talent in general. We see it as marketers. How do we get really good talent, especially more technical talent? Banks are struggling with it. So I think there's an opportunity for us to help, the banks become, seen as an employer of choice, as someone who does want to grow and develop young talent, that it's not just the teller jobs. There are so many really cool, interesting jobs within financial services. So it's interesting. What started as just maybe a tactic within a larger strategy has blown out into this, really cool segment and opportunity that's resonating in multiple areas.
I want to talk about the whole industry itself as far as the image of the banks, because I think that's a really important topic that I've got a son in college now. I got some younger ones, but we're talking about what are you going to do when you get them out of college? Banks didn't even show up on any of his radar screens. You would think that is a massive opportunity for young people to get into, especially because of the importance of security and the tech and the evolution of it.
Absolutely.
How are they managing those waters?
Yeah, I think the ones that are successful, are starting with education. So they are being more visible on college campuses. They are creating programs where students and new graduates or interns are rotating through the bank so that they can really see firsthand all the different areas, and retail is very different than commercial and investment. And then you've got cool things happening within HR and within marketing with innovation. Some banks have their own innovation centers. There's actually one of our very first emerging leaders, a University of Texas grad. So your alma mater, hook 'em. There you go. That she was kind of, she went through the McCombs Business School, super, super sharp. And they found her and they got her into the program. And she thought, well, this might be interesting. Let me just kind of see what's out there. And she's really connected with the community development side of the house too, which I think is also not as visible. I think as an average consumer, you still hear a lot of the bad headlines of data breaches and things like that. But banks do so much good within communities and have really cool programs. And that's what I loved when I was in banking. We did a lot of really cool stuff for veterans and for financial literacy within the Chicago public school system, which is so, so needed. So that could be, a passion, which you probably would have never thought to go to a bank to get that type of passion fulfilled within you, if that was really kind of your thing.
Social causes are huge. And I would agree. I see a lot of that within the trends within bank is the fact they all do have very good community programs and giving back.
Yep. Yeah. And then you have to do a good job of, and I think she's just such a great success story. She got married, she has had children, and the bank has been very flexible with her and has really encouraged her along the way. So I think there's an opportunity for them to tell their story better in terms of all the different opportunities to get more plugged in with internships, the college campuses, but then also making sure they're staying on top of more modern, workplace dynamics. And so that it's never going to be the hoodies and tables and pinball machines, but there, we are seeing a lot more flexibility there too. It's the world we live in. And I think banks are realizing that to keep the talent, they really need to encourage people, and especially, as people have children, as their lifestyles change and things like that.
Yeah, flex lifestyle. I think every industry is seeing that right now. So since we're talking about the subject of, the younger generation, If you were to look back and you give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Such a good question. I think the one thing that I would do is be comfortable challenging the process sooner than I did. I think I fell into kind of good soldier mode. I was raised to, respect authority and all that good stuff and respect my teachers. And I really appreciate that. But it made it hard for me to disagree with a boss sometimes. And as I started to do that, though, I saw the respect that when I did it the right way for the right, you pick your causes and you obviously still do it in a professional way. But I saw that it actually deepened relationships. And, my manager, saw me then in a different light and would come to me then sometimes with those things. So I think doing that sooner, because it ended up serving me very well, that would be the one thing, I would probably tell my younger self.
Do you think that was because it kind of showed that, hey, I've got a backbone and I have beliefs and this is, I'm just not going to just accept. I want to be able to bring value and bring my perspective to help grow this business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes you have bosses that think they know, the best way to do it all. I mean, everyone's a marketer in some way. But yeah, I think when they can see that, and obviously they have to take it in a way that doesn't feel defensive or that you're challenging their authority. So I think that's where the style comes in, but that they can appreciate that you can bring that to the table. You can help them see issues differently and some blind spots that they've got. We've all got them. So I think it's part of building just really, strong relationships with the manager and with your peers too, for sure.
I think it's incredible advice. And I would encourage even my own kids the same advice. Make sure that you are standing up and really pushing for what you believe and making. Yeah,
my daughter is actually in her first year of a marketing job. And, she was talking through a situation with me and I was so proud of her because she did that thing. She kind of respectfully went in and said, hey, here's my concerns. And it worked out well for her. And I'm like, gosh, 22, it's like, damn.
Well, maybe you raised her right. She clearly raised her right because she's doing that. That's, I think, really cool to see. I mean, when you see the traits like that with your own kids as a parent, we're now talking about parenting, not necessarily BAI stuff and marketing, sure. But I think it's so important to show, hey, you raised your kid right. They had enough respect to be able to watch and observe, and they're doing certain things like that.
Yeah, it is. It's such a gift. And there's a line that your kids are your greatest teachers. And I've got a son as well. And, I see them out in the world now doing their thing and gain inspiration from them all the time and so much pride. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate all the information, being a part of the podcast. I love your input about the leadership and what it takes to really move the needle internally and why it's so important to basically prioritize internal initiatives and how to do that. So thank you so much for being on the show, Holly.
Thank you, Rusty. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Hopefully have you on down the road again and kind of do a follow-up.
That would be great. I would love it.
Well, good. Well, for everyone else listening at home or online, I appreciate you listening to the Why Marketing Podcast. Please make sure to follow us and subscribe online and share with your fellow friends and marketers. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.